The honeybee, Apis mellifera. For over 10,000 years, man has harvested honey. But where does it come from? Join us on the quest for nectar. It's a story of intrigue, survival, and rich rewards. With a cast of thousands, stay tuned. It's a bee movie. Everyone knows the old saying about honeybees. They're busy. But you know what? They really are busy. Honeybees are nature's version of the workaholic. Well, imagine. You're a worker bee. You live for 4 weeks, 6 tops, and in that time, you'll be a maid, a nurse, a cook, a builder, and then it's over. At a month old, you're in your prime. Yet despite all that hard work, you'll never own your own hive. And if you don't toe your weight in the colony, you get kicked out. So if you think you work hard, just relax and be glad you're not a honeybee. It's harsh, but it's the way of the hive. And whenever you taste honey, eat an apple, or put on a soft cotton shirt, you're enjoying the work of the honeybee. In their quest for nectar, they pollinate 3 million acres of U.S. crops, including apples and blueberries, cranberries and watermelon, as well as cotton and cucumbers. In total, $9.7 billion worth of crops are pollinated by honeybees, 141 million in New Jersey alone, so beekeeping is serious business. The first beekeepers found wild nests in hollow trees, but eventually they learned to capture swarms of bees. It turns out that's still how many beekeepers get started. Bees swarm when the original colony gets overcrowded, so they're actually looking for a new home. And it's easy for beekeepers to coax them into what's called a super, which is kind of a prefab bee house complete with honeycomb. That is, it's easy if you're a beekeeper.
Saw my first swarm and got intrigued, and my dad told me how to get it in a box, and I put it in a box and had bees ever since. The first swarm was on a fence post, and he said, well, you shake the post and they'll all walk in the hive. Well, I was scared of the bees at the time. You know, I went out with a baseball bat and I hit it so hard it spread them halfway across the lawn, and they didn't go in the box. But the next night I went out and hit them again, not as hard, and we got the swarm.
Yep, there she is, right there. Good hive, Mark.
That hive made 2 gallons of honey the first year, and I went right by the book, got all the books, and we warmed the honey up, and one of them ran over a little bit. I put it under the sink to rinse it off. The jar cracked, and half my crop went down the drain. But I stayed in it anyway. We expect our bees this year to make probably over 40 tons of just blueberry honey.
Bob's what's called a commercial beekeeper. He has 3,000 colonies of bees. They pollinate crops up and down the East Coast. You see, back in the 1950s, many small farms growing lots of crops were transformed into large farms specializing in one crop. And when thousands of acres of blueberries require pollination at once, farmers need to bring in the professionals.
The job the bees do is to carry pollen from one flower to the other. They have to get the pollen on the pistil, and then that pollen pollinates the flowers, and the pollen grains on the pistil causes the seeds to grow on the plant. And the more seeds that are pollinated and developed, the bigger the berry is going to be. But if the bell of the flower falls off white, then that's a sign that the berry is pollinated. In blueberries, there's about 17 million flowers to the acre, so it takes between 1 and 2 hives to the acre to pollinate it, and on the average is around 50,000 bees in a hive. The bees carry a charge, so if you see the bee just bypass a flower, it's because they know another bee has been there a short time ago. But the flower will build up this electrical charge, and when the bee works that flower, it neutralizes that charge. So when the bee can tell, even before it touches the flower, whether there's nectar in the flower.
You can see honeybees at work pollinating in your own garden, and maybe one day you'll find your own swarm. That's what happened to Bo in Trenton, New Jersey. So he called local beekeeper Bob Hughes, who explained why the bees had taken up residence in Bo's apple tree.
So in their own little way of thinking, they turned around and they said, look, Let's a bunch of us bail out of here and go find another house.
Exactly.
And they took the existing queen with them. Okay, so now what happened was a lot of the field bees and the queen, they came over here, they set up in your tree. You know, I've got
These industrious bees built their own home, which is rare. So Bob has made room in his super for the natural honeycomb. He'll slide his super underneath the hive and let the comb lay in the box. Then he'll depend on the scout bees to lead the workers back to their new home.
by tonight they ought to bring the rest of the bees down into this box, and then what I'll really do is come back here tomorrow morning or some night after dark and pick up the whole box. They'll all be inside, take them out here, and that'll be the end of it.
That'll be the end of it for Bo. He didn't seem too interested in raising his own bees.
Beekeeping has an inherent ability to exclude a lot of people, because just the thought of working with insects turns them off, let alone insects that have a business end that can inflict a sting. A lot of young kids, I find, are very interested in it because they're kind of interested in insects and creepy crawly things and stuff too. It's a fun hobby, it's an interesting hobby, it explains nature, and it keeps you in tune to nature.
But for hundreds of years, nature baffled the beekeeper. He couldn't figure out how to take the honeycomb without sacrificing the bees or damaging the hive.
This is a straw bee skep, and this is how honeybees were kept over in Europe in the Middle Ages. And this was made out of woven straw. And what the beekeeper would do back then is he would stick a couple sticks in the side of this, and he would go ahead and shake his swarm into this in the spring, set it up on a flat board, and jack it up a little bit so there was an entrance where the bees could come and go from. And this would provide a dark, dry cavity, which is what honeybees love. It's where they love to live.
But how do they need to live? In 1851, an observant beekeeper discovered the concept of bee space. Bees need exactly 3/8 of an inch to crawl around inside the hive. Any more or less, and they'll build honeycomb or seal up the area with a sticky secretion called propolis. But with frames 3/8 of an inch apart, modern hives are movable, making it possible to harvest surplus honey, which makes for happy beekeepers and even happier bees.
The honey can be extracted, and then the frames can be put back into the hive. And what this has allowed beekeepers to do is reuse their combs year after year.
Rather than pine needle.
So are you ready to start your own hive? First, you'll need a smoker to let the bees know you're coming. The smoke calms them, and they'll be easier to work with. A veil comes in handy if the bees get a little too feisty. And since honeybees like to glue everything together, a hive tool helps pry the frames apart. Well, that's how the beekeepers get started. But what about the bees?
The baby bee in any stage, egg, larvae, pupae, is considered brood. And brood is generally in the middle of the frames. The larvae look like little tiny worms curled up in the bottom of the cell. And eggs look like tiny grains of rice deposited on the far back of the cell. The pupae emerges by, when it reaches full maturity, it actually eats its way out of the cell. It eats the cap right off the cell, and then it will slowly crawl out. Baby bee. The average lifespan of a worker bee in the summertime is approximately 6 weeks. About 3 weeks in the hive and 3 weeks outside of the hive foraging. Most of the bees that you would ever see will be worker bees, and they have many, many roles. One of the first jobs they'll do is they become house cleaning bees, and first they'll start cleaning out cells where the queen would lay an egg. Then they'll go and they also clean out cells where the bees, the field bees, would store their honey. Then generally very young worker bees have glands in their abdomen where the wax is produced. So any place that they need to build comb or cap honey, the young worker bees will provide that wax for that purpose. In some instances, when you have a big, large colony that's socking in a lot of honey, you'll have, on a hot day, you'll have bees actually fanning their wings to bring air into the colony, and also other bees a lot of times on the other side of the landing board, fanning their wings outside, so they have a good flow of air circulation throughout the colony. Then they move on and they end up feeding and cleaning the little larvae as they're developing. And then finally, one of their last jobs that they do while they're inside of the hive is as they mature, their sting and their venom glands develop and they become guard bees. And they'll stand at the entrances and they'll guard the entrance. Then about the last 3 weeks of their life, they're spent as foraging bees. As the honeybee, the foraging honeybee goes from flower to flower, honeybees are covered with hairs, and the pollen grains on those flowers stick to the hairs on that honeybee's body. And she generally uses her legs to comb her hair and get that pollen off. They form it into a ball, and there's little pollen baskets on the side of their legs where this pollen will stick. And then they bring it back to the hive that way. And the reason they get covered with pollen, some bees will go looking for pollen when they need pollen in the hive, but pollen can also be a byproduct of them gathering nectar, which they would turn into honey. And how that works is the bee flies from flower to flower, sticks out her tongue, and sucks up a belly full of nectar that the flower naturally produces. And then she would bring that back to the colony, deposit it in a cell. The bees then fan that nectar and evaporate the moisture out of it. They reduce the moisture content down to below 18%, and then it's considered honey. Okay, the drone is the male member of the colony. Drones, their sole purpose in life is to mate with young virgin queens. A young queen may mate with up to 15 or 20 drones, and that's the only time she mates in her whole life. When a drone mates with the queen, the drone dies. The queen is the mother of all the bees in the hive. There's only one queen in a beehive, and her primary job is to lay eggs, which in turn make more worker bees and drones for the hive. The queen can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day, which is about 1.5 times her body weight. She doesn't feed herself or clean herself. She has attendant bees to do that for her. All she has to do is lay eggs, lay eggs, lay eggs. And what she does is she walks around on the frames, searching in the cells. When she finds an empty cell that has already been cleaned by the worker bees, she'll deposit her abdomen in there and lay an egg. Generally, a young queen will head a hive that produces more honey because she can lay more eggs and is much more vigorous than an older queen. The worker bees can sense that the queen is not keeping up her end of the bargain or producing what she should. And what they'll do is they'll take a young larvae that is just hatched out and put it into a larger cell, and they'll go ahead and they feed that larvae a substance called royal jelly. And that royal jelly is very, very high in energy and high in protein, and it causes the worker bee's reproductive system to fully develop so that she would be capable of laying eggs. Generally, when they do this, they may start 5 or 10 cells that they have a new queen growing in, and then as those cells hatch out, sometimes if one hatches out real early, she'll go and sting through the other cells and kill the one so she doesn't have any competition. Or if a lot of them hatch at the same time, they may fight to see who's the most vigorous one that's going to end up heading the colony. Honeybees, their only defense mechanism against when they feel threatened is to sting. Honeybees do have a sting. The sting has a barb on it, so when a worker bee stings something, that worker bee actually dies because part of the contents of her abdomen come out as she places the sting, along with a venom sac which is attached to the sting. It's like a heart muscle, and it continues to pump the venom. It takes about 5 minutes to get the full dose of honeybee venom. So the key point is, for anybody who is stung, is they want to get the stinger removed as soon as possible if they're stung by a honeybee.
As if they weren't fascinating enough, honeybees have yet another incredible skill. They actually have their own language. Body language, that is. With movement and pulses of sound, they help each other locate nectar. It's even got a great name, the waggle dance.
Through this dance, the bees can communicate the direction, the distance, and what it smells and tastes like. One direction of it is a waggle, where the bee just shakes its tail. And the direction that the bee is heading, when the bee's wagging its tail, is the direction by the sun, which direction the food source is that the bee is telling the other bees about. Each bee has a built-in magnetic substance, so inside the dark hive it still knows where the sun is. It knows where the sun is on even a cloudy day because of its polarized vision. So it can tell which direction the light's rays are. So the bee's dance changes throughout the day because the sun is moving. So straight up, if the bee is wagging its tail, it's going straight up the comb, then he's saying head directly towards the sun. And if he goes straight down, it's directly away from the sun, and then whatever degree angle from straight up, that's a degree the bee would go from the sun. 2 or 3 slow wags is a distance of 2 miles or more. The intensity of the dance, that's how good the bee thinks it is. If it's a real sweet source, he gets a real fast, excited wag. If it's a real calm type of dance, then that's where it is if you want to go get it.
As you can see, beekeepers are a dedicated bunch, and they'll do just about anything to show off their beloved bees.
To start, to make a bee beard, first you have to have a queen bee, and Grant's put the queen bee in a little cage like this, and we're going to tie that up under his chin. This is the heart of the beard. This is what attracts all the bees to form on your chin. It's not just because they want to look like a beard. And we swarm, we shake them out on a piece of plywood or cardboard, and we let them walk up. They'll hang on the queen cage, and we form them into what looks like a beard. Try to aim it down. They like to walk up, down in the front here.
Everyone loves a good bee beard. You don't see one every day, so it gets your attention. But more importantly, it shows people that honeybees are manageable. They work with us when we take the time to understand them.
Aim her down some more. That's good.
And they work hard. One colony of bees can produce 60 to 200 pounds of honey, but their efforts go well beyond just honey. Today, 1/3 of everything we eat comes from insect-pollinated plants.
And we feed these bees through the screen until they can't take any more honey. And when they stop taking the honey off the screen, then the honey stomach is full. They carry 80% of their own weight is in that honey stomach, and they can't work the sting muscle when they're full of honey like that. They really couldn't sting you unless you really mashed one, which is easy to do because there's probably 15 or 20,000 bees on his chin.
There's got to be 5 pounds of bees there.
Yeah, it was heavier than I expected.
Oh, that's beautiful. The bees were so cooperative, Bob was able to update Grant's traditional bee beard to a more fashionable bee goatee.
How you doing?
He's just going to lower right down first. Misses. That's a quaid. Okay, now he's going to give a good down shake. There you go. There's the queen bee. That's what makes it all possible. And when I put her down, she'll pick up the scent of all those bees. She'll walk right in behind them. She'll walk that way.
We are going to look at some of their colonies of honeybees and examine them for brood diseases and parasites. I am tasked as a bee inspector with the Department of Agriculture to help strengthen and cultivate the beekeeping industry in New Jersey. One of the ways we do that is by working with beekeepers to help them to be able to identify disease and parasites within their apiaries. Well, this looks like it's full. this is about half full. This next frame's loaded with brood, and this is where I look for the brood diseases in the sealed brood a lot of times. What I'm looking for right now is the cat brood. You see how it has a nice fuzzy surface. It's convex, not concave, and there's no perforations in it. While I'm in here, I'm going to take a few bees in a jar, and we're going to do a sugar roll just to check them for varroa mites. And I'm going to take some bees right off the frame. Put that lid on, and then we'll put this hive back together. And this is something that you guys could easily do to monitor your mites periodically. Some bees in a mason jar with an 1/8 inch mesh on top. You need a little confectionery sugar. About a teaspoonful. It gets a little lumpy when there's been a lot of humidity around. Have you? No, this is for varroa. And then you shake them up. The nice thing about this test is it doesn't kill the bees. We'll put them right back in front, and they'll go right back in the hive. And then we turn it upside down. And you'll see their little legs. They're like a little seed. I know you know what they look like. And I don't see anything. So that's good.
If the mites go unchecked, we will not have any bees at all.
You know.
Oh, there's a mite walking around right there.
Don't say that.
Yeah, right there. This mite at the tip of my finger is one of the 2 mites which is killing the bees. If we want good, strong agriculture, we need good, strong, healthy colonies of bees. If there was not...
Grant also educates teachers and kids about how honeybees help farmers.
there wouldn't be pumpkins for Halloween. All farms that are producing certain crops that require pollination, we require beekeepers to bring in honeybees. There are farms that bring in 2,000 to 3,000 colonies of bees, and then there are farms that only require 1 colony of bees.
I learned that if there were no bees, we would not be able to drink milk because the bees pollinate the grass and the cows eat the grass.
The queen does what?
The kids learned today that agriculture is dependent upon the honeybee.
I didn't know that honeybees wouldn't sting you if you didn't bother them and stuff, and I learned that they're pretty cool.
They really are pretty cool. Yes. They're also pretty fast. They can fly 15 miles an hour. Stroking more than 11,000 times a minute, those 4 little wings create the honeybee's distinct buzz. Flying up to 5 miles for a nectar source, the honeybee may visit anywhere from 50 to 100 flowers per trip. But together, the hive has to tap 2 million blossoms to make just 1 pound of honey. This year, Bob Harvey is hoping his bees will give him 200 tons of honey. For beekeepers to get their honey, they have machines which remove the wax cappings the bees place over the honey cells. Then they put the frames into an extractor which works like a centrifuge to spin out the honey. Bob Harvey's son, CJ, explained what goes on inside the honey house.
Well, after we bring the honey, we're mainly just taking frames out of the boxes, looking in if it has some caps on it, like white cappings. We send it through the conveyor, and we turn on there's a little chains in there, and they go around, and they like rip off all the cappings. Well, when it comes out the other side, my brother or whoever is loading, they just pick up the frames and they stick them into the spinner. The spinner goes around and around, and it spins off all the honey, and the honey goes off to the sides and drips down into pipes underneath. and then all the honey bubbles into there. And then after it settles, all the wax settles on the top, we just skim it off, we put it in the big spinner in the back, and then it gets put into a melter and melted down. And then it's made into blocks. After the wax dries, it turns into something like this, and this wax, my brother or whoever buys it can remelt it down into candles or anything else you want.
Beeswax is used in everything from lipstick to shoe polish to candy bars. So clearly, the world wouldn't look or taste quite as good without the honeybee. So it's the end of another busy season for New Jersey honeybees. By fall, the blossoms are mostly gone, and the bees start to settle down for winter. With enough honey stored to last until spring, they'll stay warm by clustering together inside the hive. This is about the closest honeybees get to any kind of vacation. Of course, if you're one of Bob Harvey's bees, you're going back to work. It's time for an all-expense-paid trip down to Florida, where the orange groves are waiting.
1st of September, we try to get the bees, start getting the bees into Florida and try to get as many as we can in there by the middle of September. That's when honey flows, the fall flows start. We send them on tractor trailers, flatbed tractor trailers, and hopefully we can get 528 on a load. It depends on how heavy the hives are. That would be about 30 million bees, and hopefully we can get that whole thing loaded, netted, and out of here without anybody getting stung. The bees all come back to the hive at night, so when you pick them up at night, you got everything, and you can move them from state to state, and we load them one night in Florida, and they're back here in Blueberries the next night. In the morning, when they come out and they don't recognize the area, they fly backwards, memorize the location, and they'll come right back to the hive. When you're pulling honey, then you want to carry nets with you if you want to stop for lunch, because the bees, stragglers are still in there and they come out, and most people don't even recognize them as beehives on the box, unless there's been times when the toll keeper wouldn't even take the toll. They paid it for us. Just closed the door and said, go on.
So this fall, on your way to work, if you see a tractor trailer heading down the highway, just remember, you're not the only one who has to get to work on time.
Life is sweet, if you know what I mean, so complete.
Good girls.
When you are the queen, I don't need a king who has got lots of money. As long as somebody keeps bringing me honey, there's one little thing that I want you to know. We only sting when you block the honey flow. We'll give a buzz when you arrive, then make a beeline for the hive, where you'll see a lot of happy honeybees. Come on, let's get busy, I'm hungry. Hey you, don't you have a cell to clean? Come on, let's work it, work it.
Peace, dude.
If a bee movie has gotten you interested in beekeeping, the New Jersey Beekeepers Association is more than happy to help you get started. Contact the state apiarist at the New Jersey Department of Agriculture.